Okay, so hello to all the people who are not here. But today I'm here, gonna play Streets of Rage again. I actually played the first one from this collection a couple nights ago and kind of fell short of completing it. Got to probably like the most lastest part of the game before you fight the final boss, and that didn't go so well. um, but I'm going to be trying again today. This time I'm going to be using a cheat code that will give me more lives, and hopefully that will be a big help. And just hopefully I fare better this time around because games now, or games back then are they were developed with a different frame of mind than they are now. Games back then they weren't meant to be completed on your first playthrough. Usually, they were meant to, even though these games maybe they have like an hour of content, if that. These games were meant um, to play it and then retry it. You play the first time, you come up short, and you just play it over and over and over again until you get better and better and better until you learn more about the game, maybe learn some little cheap tricks along the way. And and the goal is to try to get better each time that you play. So these games really weren't meant to be defeated in one playthrough. Like they were meant for you to just play for like hours on end, or whatever the case may be, until you complete it. And completing these games were just it was a huge sense of accomplishment to be able to do that. Games are different now. Even if it's easy, even if you can do it in a playthrough, these games still have hours and hours and hours worth of content. Back then, not so much. If you just breeze through each of these games, you'll be done with them in about an hour. So they had to be that much more difficult to warrant replay value and all that. All right, so let's load up the game. I'm playing the. This is from their vintage collection of Streets of Rage, which is available on the 360, but it can work. It's backwards compatible on the Xbox One. I like the little intro screen. Okay, so it loaded up at Streets of Rage 1, which is where I last left it. Alright, so if I'm going to be doing cheat codes and stuff, because I don't think there's anything like it gives me game settings, but this is it. Yeah, there's nothing else to it. Same thing with the settings. The only thing I can really do is start the game. Sega. The city was once a happy, peaceful place, until one day, a powerful secret criminal organization took over. This vicious syndicate soon had control of the government and even the police force. The city has become a center of violence and crime where no one is safe. Amid this turmoil, a group of determined young police officers have sworn to clean up the city Among them are Adam Hunter, Axel Stone, and Blaze Fielding. They are willing to risk anything, even their lives, on the streets of rage. All right. So, the only cheat code that I am aware of in this game, at least one that works and is confirmed, is one that simply gives me extra lives as well as a level select. So even though I'm gonna be playing the game over again, I'm not gonna skip over to the last level unless I die at the last level again. Then I'm just gonna jump to the last level and um, you know try to go at it from there. But so to have this code, to get this code to work is a little weird, but this is what sometimes we had to resort to back in the day. It actually requires the use of two controllers, and it's a very simple cheat. I should look it up again really quick. Make sure I got everything right. Okay, so it requires me to, as I mentioned earlier, I have get a second controller, basically player two controller. And then I have to hold four buttons on the controller, which is the A, B, and C buttons. In this instance, for us, it would be the X, A, and B buttons, and holding right on the second controller, while on controller with controller one, I simply go and hit the options. So let's try it out. Okay. Oh, actually, you probably can't see from the screen because of my my lighting settings. But I actually got it to work. So at first, I was having trouble getting it to work because even though I had a second controller hooked up to the Xbox, I didn't press start. Like it was on and everything, but I had to press start so the game can recognize it. So we set the difficulty to easy as I did last time, and it didn't help me. But what will help me is starting out with 7 lives, because there's you only get like 3 continues in the game, and there's, as far as I could see, I don't think you can increase those. There was a code that a lot of different sites mention on how to get it, but every time I do it, I don't even know if it works because it requires you to do it on the title screen, and there's no notification let you know that if it worked or not. So I did try it before starting. So if I lose a continue, like, I'll see how many continues that I end up having. And here is where all the levels. So I could pick any of the levels, which is 8. No, but screw it. We'll start with the first level and then go from there. One sec. We got Adam, Axel, and Blaze. I don't know why they've kind of named them so similarly. It's like they represent the grades that each of the characters can get. So he's gonna go with Blaze. Because Blaze is actually my preferred character in this game. So if you're watching this, sit back and enjoy the music. Okay, so I don't know why this happens. From time to time you'll fight, and particularly one of those girls, and you'll hit them and they just fall down, and it's kind of just annoying. I don't know if that's what it's meant to happen, if it's some type of bug or glitch. Alright, I guess that's gonna have to be how I beat them. Before I was trying to see if maybe I can, when they jump ahead of me, like maybe I can like move away enough that I can turn around and hit them, but they have really far reach as far as grabs go. So I noticed that strategy wasn't really working, and then I noticed that they, you know, because AI back then, or in a way they even still do now, you know, they react to you, the player, depending on the positioning of your character. So when so here I am walking away from them, and then that's like almost the only time where they don't do their stupid flip jump to grab me. It seems like they only do it when I'm facing forwards. You know, sounds like a tedious way to win, but if I don't want to lose a lot of lives doing it, especially when you know, I have to face them again on the final level, and I won't have the assistance of those specials. Because they pretty much, last time I fought them, they took all my lives away. The only other really annoying enemy, which I think, you know, I developed a strategy for, is the dude with the claws. It seems like the only way to really hit him is to, you know, try to get him with grabs. I don't know, maybe it is on purpose, maybe it's not a bug. Because if I sit there and hit her, and while I'm looking at her, it takes a little bit for her to get up. But as soon as I turn around, like, she gets right back up. Aw, I didn't mean to pick up the knife. I'm gonna use my special. I mean, fortunately, I'm doing pretty alright as far as lives goes. You know, yeah, I lost a few, but I've also gained a few. And also the fact that I'm this far into the game and I'm not even in danger of losing and continuing. Oh, got him stuck in a little lock. Awesome. Didn't kill him, but... Ah, what the fuck is that? Shit. I guess she tried to pick them up, but she can't. So if she can, I'm wondering if the other characters can, because you know they're guys, so therefore they got to be all big and strong and stuff. No, I don't know. I think if this goes well, I might play this game a few more times. Because my initial plan for doing a Streets of Rage run would just be to play through all the Streets of Rages, and I was just gonna beat them the one time. And alright, awesome. Extra special, extra life. Those are all good things to have. And I was gonna do it all as you know, just as Blaze. But I don't know. I might just be like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll play through each of the games as all the characters or something. Oh, they got hit anyways. That's what they get. Oh, really? I got hit from that? And I lost my extra special. That sucks. And I really could have used that as well. Because I think I'm fighting the claw guys. Again. I remember back when I was little, like this level used to be, I guess the way they used to describe back then would be like a choke point of sorts. Where, yeah, I would always get to this level, and usually this is the level where I would die in. And then, you know, once I got through this level, then, because the following level, you're in an elevator, you know, going up to what's gonna lead to the final level of the game. And fortunately, as far as that level goes, there's no boss battle or anything. Yeah, I gotta fight a pair of claw guys. That extra freaking special would have helped a lot. It would have helped a lot. Alright, so for my plan for trying to grab them, mostly worked. Alright. So it looks like for the most part I have like a strat for all the difficult parts of the game. And what's funny is that this is probably stuff like I knew before from playing this game repeatedly back in the day, but it's really been a long time since I even regularly played Streets of Rage. Oh, Darkman, what's up, dude? The godfather of Double Dragon. I mean, Double Dragon, I think, is the, godfather of beat 'em ups. But, Streets of Rage, Final Fight, they're all up there. Going off the elevator. Throw him off. Can I throw him off? Nah, a little too far. Yeah, no, for sure. They're excellent games. Those are the type of games where like I can never get bored of. They're all great in their own right. Like I know everyone likes to argue over, which one is the best one, and they all have their own, strengths and weaknesses. I'm just gonna use my special. But if anything, I really like the genre of beat 'em ups. It's a series of games that I grew up with, especially growing up with arcades and all that. So between beat 'em ups and fighting games, those were the types of games that I mostly played. I also have my health anyways. Totally forgot about Bro Cop. Yeah, man, that was. I think they only did that in this game, where you can call the police and they'll fire like a giant cannon and obliterate all the either it'll kill all the regular enemies for sure, and if you're fighting a boss, they'll lose like some health, a considerable amount of health, but they'll still be alive. But yeah, you used to be able to go summon them, and I think that was the thing for this game. I think after this they dropped it. Alright, call him Bro Cop again. And also, you can't have a good beat 'em up without having an elevator battle. All the beat 'em up greats have them, even the shitty ones. And I think that's the end of the level. Yeah. Law? What law? You mean me? Yeah, fortunately the that 7th or that last level I just didn't have like a boss battle or anything like that. But as and also, just as I was saying that you can't have a great beat 'em up without you know, a battle on a giant elevator, you also can't have a final boss and not fight them in a penthouse. You know, while this game took a lot from Final Fight, you know, they definitely did. They definitely did a lot for this game. You know, just adding a lot of their own thing. I think, as far as the first Streets of Rage goes, I think I actually prefer this over the first Final Fight. But here, this is actually the last level for Streets of Rage 1. You may have noticed that I don't have any specials. I have no access to them. This is the only level in the game where you're actually inside something, so I guess that's why you don't have the ability to call the Bro Cops. And it's also a really long level. So even if I beat, you know, all the levels and I got to this point, usually I die somewhere during this level and gotta start over. You know, what kind of adds to the difficulty is, you know, there's also kind of like, this level, just like many other beat 'em ups, is almost like a boss rush mode in a way. You know, you have to fight quite a few of the bosses you fought throughout the game, as well as still fighting, you know, all the lackeys and henchmen. Alright, so he wasn't too bad. But there's some that's just the worst. I hate this fucker. These little juggling dudes are annoying. But fortunately I managed to dispatch him no problem. And then for everyone, or anyone watching really, you can see how in the background, actually because when you start this game, it's at nighttime, and so, you know, so this game basically takes place in the course of an evening, you know, and slowly going into, you know, the morning hours of dawn, basically. So as you progress through the level, when you see the windows, it gets to, you know, ends up being like complete daytime. So our heroes must be tired from, you know, spending that long fighting and kicking ass. Alright, awesome. I mean, last time I fought him, you know, in this level, he was kind of a pain in the ass. So I think I only have one more annoying set of bosses to fight before I get to the final boss. So far this is turning out to be a really good run. And if you were also paying attention, like, so outside just got a little bit more lighter as I was moving along. It's just stuff like that is just such cool little touches that makes such a difference for back in the day. You know, they didn't have to do any of that. They could have just left it nighttime and it still would have been the same, you know, the same exact awesome game, but the little things like that help with the overall, you know, aesthetic and look of the game. For some reason, I don't know why. Oh no, never mind, you can't. Like, I was trying to figure out why he wouldn't step on the tile. And so far I haven't even wasted a continue, so things are, yeah, going pretty good. You know, had I not done this cheat code, I probably would have used up a continue or so. Oh man, not too close to this fat ass. They're trying to grab him does damage to me. So I think the only boss I have left is the two Blaze twins, basically. I don't know if they're supposed to be twins, clones. Here we go. I mean, it's tedious as fuck, but it's pretty much like the best way to, you know, to beat them, to get some hits on them. Because otherwise, they just keep throwing at you and like that. And you lose way more health than it's worth trying to, for me anyways, like trying to go and either grab them or to avoid their throws. So like I said, tedious as fuck, but last time I fought them, I lost all my lives trying to beat them. So I'd rather go and do something cheap like that. Well, you found your way here. Would you consider becoming my right-hand man? So from what I remember, I believe like if you said yes, then I don't think it's like a game over or anything, but I think the game makes you start back at either the beginning of this level or the beginning of the last level. Something like that. If this was 2 players and one of you said yeah and the other said no, you can fight each other. So, but of course, if we want to, you know, beat the game, we want the good ending. So we're gonna say no. You really want to die, don't you? I'll be happy to oblige. I should have more than enough lives to beat this game because I haven't used any continues. So I'm gonna try to put my name, which for some reason it's slow and buggy. I don't know why. was in the middle of my move and he hit me. Yay, endings. And now the sun sets again. So apparently they spent the whole day dealing with this shit. The whole night and morning beating up the boss and his minions. And then probably have to spend the rest of the day, you know, answering questions, filling out paperwork, all that nonsense. So now I'm debating if I should just keep playing Streets of Rage 1 for the heck of it. I think so. Make sure all the options are still set the way they are. They are, but do I still have the lives? Check. Yeah, I do. Alright. So if you guys are down, I'm done for another round of Streets of Rage. That was violent. Fuck. Them right through the telephone booth. Don't mind me, just beating up everyone with the pipe. Oh, that went really well. Easy. Well, I did pick that difficulty level, but still. Alright, hold on. Give me 1 second here. Not going anywhere. For whomever just joined us, welcome and Alright, I'm back. Not that I went anywhere, but had some movement noise going around the house, so I didn't want all the extra audio. So once again, I managed to make it to the final level. This time I did it as Adam. So when I started playing as Adam, I was actually doing pretty great at the start. To the point where I would have... Come on, man. Sometimes this enemy AI is annoying. But, you know, it's to the point where I maxed out the number of lives that I got, but I still kept getting lives. But unfortunately, it wasn't one of those games where it kept counting the lives, where it's like, even though it goes up to 9 and doesn't go much, and doesn't go past that at all. There's some games where it's like, if you got an extra life or more, it still counts it. It's just, you know, when you die and you lose a life, you know, the life counter won't go down. Because, you know, you have more lives than the game can display. But in this game, it's like, nah, that's all you're getting. Like, you get more lives than what we can display, too bad. But then towards the end, towards the later levels, I mean, I'm still doing really good. Like, this isn't going to really affect me at all. But towards the later half of the game, started doing much poorly with Adam. My thinking has to do with his speed compared to Blaze. Blaze is really fast. Granted, you know, Adam can do, you know, some more damage than Blaze, but there's times where I get hit while trying to hit the enemy. And, yeah, that just goes to show his speed. Or I'll be in the middle of comboing an enemy and, you know, another enemy comes up. I don't got time to turn around and hit him. Alright, so now I figured out how this dude works. No, this isn't a special trick or anything, this is just his stupid pattern. And that was that. So this level is basically serves as a boss rush level. And which is usually the case in a lot of beat 'em ups. You sometimes have that final level where, you know, you also have to fight all the bosses over. And it's a pretty common gimmick in most of these games. You know, just do it as a way to kind of like up the difficulty of the game. Especially if you're in an arcade and you're spending quarters, you know, they want to try to get those few extra quarters out of you. And you know what? It worked, so. But the difference with Streets of Rage, though, is that it's purely... Can I pick up the pipe? Aw, you suck me. This game never came out in the arcades. It was a beat 'em up just straight up made for the Sega Genesis. So there's no arcade counterpart to this, which is fine because had this game come out in arcade, it would have looked amazing, a lot better than this. But if it was ported to the Sega Genesis, then, you know, it wouldn't look... It would be downgraded, because the technology in arcades versus the home consoles back then were completely different. You know, arcades were so much more powerful than the home consoles were. So a lot of cool arcade games from back then probably didn't get a console port in ever, or maybe we had to wait till PlayStation came out to get some arcade ports for, you know, for example, Fighters. You know, and that's not to say that there weren't any arcade ports, or there weren't any good ones or fairly accurate ones. You know, the arcade ports the great arcade ports that come to mind is some of the fighting game ones, like Street Fighter 2, Mortal Kombat. Yeah, these games weren't, you know, when they were ported over to console, they weren't, you know, 100% arcade accurate. But shit, if they got like really, really close to hitting that, you know, there might be some minor shortcomings, you know, frames, stuff like that comes up. What else? You know, the game speed might be like a little slower, things like that. But it was, they were still excellent ports. People got together and would play the shit out of them. I remember Killer Instinct as well. That was another great port of a fighting game. But what was crazy was that the first Killer Instinct, when that game came out originally in the arcades, that game looked amazing. It looked great. It was probably like one of the best looking fighting games, or just games in general, that came out during that time. So of course, when it got ported to the Super Nintendo, it quite wasn't the same. If anything, it's almost like, you know, like I say port, but I think really they kind of remade the game. Not necessarily from scratch, but you know, they still had a lot of the tools necessary, you know, to make it. But you know, Killer Instinct Arcade compared to the home port for Super Nintendo, like, just doesn't compare. But what they still did with the Super Nintendo looks really, really, really good with that game. But you know, everything else, like Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat, came out, you know, ridiculously well. You know, you know, they were very impressive ports. Yeah, but unfortunately, for a while, that was pretty much it. I can remember, you know, we did have some SNK games come out, so you know, those ended up being really cool games to play back then. A lot of old arcade games back in the day, as they were coming out, we didn't really see any releases for them over on the consoles. So, you know, which is kind of unfortunate. But the benefit for Sega making this game from scratch, you know, just exclusively for the Genesis, you know, not an arcade port or anything like that, is they get to utilize all the strengths of the Sega Genesis. Because had this been an arcade port, then it probably wouldn't be as good, or they would probably have to waste time making a whole other game, or maybe we wouldn't even get a console release. God damn. Yeah, Adam's really slow, so I'm getting hit a lot from this dude. I can't quite dodge him like I can with Blaze. Alright, awesome. So, you know, for me, then that pretty much confirms that, you know, Blaze is probably the best character in the game. I think so anyway, at least for me. You know, but I spent, you know, the majority of time that I used to play Streets of Rage back in the day, like, that was, she was the one that I used the most. So, you know, I might be a little bit biased towards it, but I think her speed plays a huge role as you get into the later stages of the game. Ah, you bitch. Yeah, man, but that's how it was back then. Especially when you had all these awesome arcade games that used to come out, and you know, the most powerful system at the time was the NES. So there are definitely a lot of arcade games that, you know, even with the Super Nintendo, as powerful as that system was, there still was a lot of arcade games that we just didn't get at the time. You know, it would have been cool if over on the Super Nintendo. So a good example is the Ninja Turtles arcade game. Ninja Turtles arcade game came out, the first one, at a time when all we had was like the NES, and you can't, you know, there's no way to port that game now onto the NES. So the best that they did was, before they even made the arcade game for the NES, around, actually, I think just before all these. All right, hold on. I have to apply the trick necessary to. Ah, that sucked. Okay. This isn't working out. Alright. So, tedious? Yes. Why is this guy coming out? Alright, that was really odd. I beat those two girls, and, you know, I should have just went straight into here, and some henchman lackey comes out. Random, but... But, alright, so before I head to this, boss battle, you know what? Let's, get it over with, and then I'll babble some more, because I still gotta beat the game as Alex, so... Wait, here, would you consider becoming my right-hand man? Nah, dude. Will you, though? Are you gonna be happy to oblige? I like how he also shoots his own henchmen. Oh, give me a second, because put in my name. For some reason, this is really slow. It takes forever. So before I was babbling about the original Ninja Turtles arcade game, but over on the NES, before that game came out, there was a Ninja Turtles game, a platformer that came out for the NES, and that game kind of sucked. I had it in everything because I was like a major Ninja Turtles fan back then, like I think every little kid was back then. But for that game sucked. Ah, damn it. Fucking henchman. Alright, beat it as Adam, so now I think I'll beat it as Alex next. Alright, so while this game is going through its ending and all that, let me babble about Ninja Turtles. So for the NES, I think technically the first Ninja Turtles game that actually came out was the game for the NES, which I think came out if anything, right around the same time the arcade game came out. If anything, just very shortly before. So that was the best we had, and of course the arcade game was, you know, superior game. People loved playing it. You know, it was definitely one of those games where you always had a group of people just hovering around it playing it. And at the time for the NES, the best that we had was that crappy platformer. So it was kind of a buzzkill in a way where, like, I'd be home. I mean, not home. I'd be at the arcades playing Ninja Turtles, and then I go home to play that shitty Ninja Turtles game for the NES, the first one that came out, and it was depressing because it's night and day, and the game sucked. I think the only cool thing about that game was you got to drive around with the turtle van. Other than that, that was pretty much it. Sucked. What they did eventually do was they made a sequel game. I mean, I say sequel, but it's really what they ended up doing was instead of just coming out with, you know, Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game, they released it as Ninja Turtle 2, the arcade game. Even though it's not a sequel at all to that previous NES Ninja Turtles game, they still gave it a part 2 just because. Which to me is kind of I don't know, defeating the purpose a bit, because that original game sucked. So, you know, what if you had people who went and they bought people who played that original NES game, and then, you know, you see Ninja Turtles 2, and they'd be like, is this a sequel for that shitty game? But then But then at the same time, that's why they put the arcade game subtitle, so then people will be like, oh, so this is supposed to be like the arcade game that we played, that we played in the arcades, and that was partially misleading as well. So I kind of felt that you had like this completely misleading title for this game. But that happened really often back then. Just cover boxes or titles for games used to be incredibly misleading. I'll get into more about that in a moment. Alright, let me leave this pause for now. Alright, so should I eat a snack? Nah, I think I'm good. So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah. So Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game, completely misleading title because it's like, are you saying that this is a sequel to that previous shitty Ninja Turtles game? But it's not. This is actually a game that's based off of the arcade game, but not quite. But it was still a way better game than that previous game. It followed the premise and gameplay of the arcade game. It just really didn't look anywhere close to to the look and style of the arcade game. But it was actually a pretty great game, though. In itself, really hard game. I could never beat that game by myself without cheating, or even with another person without cheating. It was a very, very tough game. Yeah, just an incredibly tough game to play. But that's how a lot of those games were back then, and back then we really didn't mind it too much. And a lot of games, including Streets of Rage, I don't think so much that Ninja Turtles game, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think there were any in-game codes, but you still had quite a few games back then where they would give you in-game codes, and it would help out a lot trying to beat the game on within one playthrough. So Contra, for example, I don't think I've ever beaten Contra by myself, without cheating or anything like that, without using the Konami code. But then I'd use the Konami code and I could beat the game in a playthrough like no problem, and I didn't mind that. But that's what a lot of games did. Like, by themselves, some of them would be really hard. Other ones, they might give you, there might be some secret cheat code that you could find out from somewhere. So that way it can give you easier time to play the game and enjoy it. And for something like Contra, like, I really didn't mind cheating or anything because, I must have played that game like a million times. Like, back when I was growing up, I don't know how many schools used to do this back then. Eventually the school that I went to stopped doing this, but for the first few years, the school that I was going to, what they used to do is when it was lunchtime, if we lived nearby, and this was a school that was like in the middle of a city that I used to live, where you have homes like right across the street from it and all around it. So I really didn't live that far from school, so we'd have, I think, like an hour lunch or something. I would walk home, get to my house, and I would boot up Contra, because by the time that I would go play the game, put in the Konami code and beat it, which was like which took about like 15 minutes, if that. It was just about enough time to go home, eat, play that, and then be on my way back to school. And I used to do that for like almost all the time. You know, because it... Yeah, I guess what I was trying to say is like, it's... You get like a cool sense of accomplishment. Like, here you are at school all day, or all morning, you know, you have a break where you get to go play some video games, and yeah, it was cool. And then a few years into going to that school, they stopped doing that. So they made it so that we all had to stay in school and eat lunch there. But as far as the that NES Ninja Turtles arcade game, that was pretty much the best we could do at that time. I mean, fortunately, it ended up being a pretty cool game. You know, yeah, it wasn't anywhere close to arcade accurate or anything like that, but it was still cool. To the point where, for the NES, they even made a sequel. Motherfucker. Oh, I should really be using this. Like, here I am, I'm sitting here trying to beat him fair and square, and it's like, wait a minute, let me just kill you now. But... So yeah, so it was to the point where they actually made a sequel for that game, which wasn't Turtles in Time, the arcade game. It was actually something called the Manhattan Project, and it was its own thing. And that was it was a cool game also, but it definitely wasn't as good as the arcade game previous to that. Over on the Super Nintendo side, it would have been cool if they did come out, like if they released the first arcade game for the SNES, but you know, if we had to settle for having Turtles in Time, then I guess we're gonna have to settle for that. Over in the arcade, Turtles in Time was just referred to as that. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time. That's it. When we had the home version of it, it was for the SNES, and it continued, you know, it continued the number of releases that we had for the NES. So it was referred to as Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. And... Alright, trying to get comfortable here. And so that game was finally the awesome, badass arcade port that we've been wanting for a really long time. Because we never got the perfect arcade port for at least a really good arcade port of the original game. You know, the original game did have, you know, the arcade game for the NES was still cool, but it still wasn't anything like the arcade. And so finally, with Turtles in Time for the SNES, we actually got like a really good arcade port. You know, it was not 100% or anything like that. You know, some minor shortcuts had to be made in order to get that game to run great on the console, but really it wasn't, you know, the changes I had to do were minimal. The biggest changes that they had to do was the original arcade game were there were 4 players. In this game, you could only have 2 players. You couldn't have the 4 players. Even though for the SNES we had something called the multi-tap, which allows you to play games with up to 4 players or even 5 players if the game allowed that, which very rarely they did. But ultimately you can only play as 2 people, which is fine. Small sacrifices to have like an awesome arcade port of a game for your home. Why is that guy moving around? He shouldn't be moving around. Alright, so that wasn't a problem. Getting a lot better at the Streets of Rage thing. So, alright, so to continue my babbling of, my old man rambles. But yeah, I think, the sacrifices they had to make in order to get a really great port for the SNES was more than worth it. And what was really cool about that release, though, was that they did, in a weird way, I kind of like it better than the arcade, because what they did in the game, they actually added a whole extra level to the home release of the game. So that's actually really cool, and you might be like, okay, that doesn't really sound like a big deal, like just one level, but back then, like, adding one whole level to a game was a lot. And in this case, it was actually a really cool level. So in the arcade game, the first 3 levels, you do the first 3 levels, and the 3rd level is you're in the sewers. And when you get to the end of the sewers, I think you had a boss fight, and the boss fight was the pizza monsters, or the pizza monster. And then and when you're done with that, and then when you beat that boss, Shredder just appears on, like a screen on the wall in the sewers, and you're transported through time. And then that's when you start playing as doing the other time-based levels. I say time-based, not that you're time necessarily, but you're just, those are the levels that you're going through time. In the home release, it's the same structure, same first 3 levels, But when you get to the end of the third level, instead of fighting the pizza monster, like series of pizza monster or pizza monster boss, I really don't remember. But you fought the Rat King instead, which makes hella a lot of sense to have the, to have the sewer level and you're fighting Rat King. And after you beat Rat King, an image of Shredder does not appear. Instead, you actually go straight from that level to the next level. So you don't get hurled through time yet. The next level ends up being the Technodrome, which was a level in the first game, but it did not make a return for the sequel as far as the arcade goes. But for the home release, God damn it, stupid henchman. Alright, I'm just gonna kill you. Fuck you. So in the home release for Turtles in Time, we had the Technodrome level, made a return, and it was a really cool level. It starts out like as your standard level, pretty similar to the previous arcade game, and you have actually you have a pair of mid bosses, which happens to be Toka and Razor from the Ninja Turtles 2 live action movie. And they were your mid-level bosses for the Technodrome level. And if you played the Turtles in Time arcade game, I can't remember for sure, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe oh goddamn. Like, Axel's really slow. See, this is why I prefer Blaze. I wouldn't be having this issue trying to hit all these enemies. So if I'm not mistaken, I believe in the arcade game, the original arcade game, Toka and Razor showed up, but at a different level, where you fought the two of them in the pirate level at the end. In the home release, instead they made the two of them as mid bosses for the Technodrome level, and so for the pirate ship level, they ended up replacing them with Rocksteady and Bebop, which is only fitting. And otherwise, in the original arcade release, you don't see Rocksteady and Bebop. So as far as the Technodrome level goes, after you beat Toka and Razor, you get into a large elevator, like almost every other beat 'em up. But I don't. The Turtles in Time arcade didn't have. The original arcade game didn't have elevator battle. I believe the first one did though, but for the second one it didn't. But for the Technodrome level, that's where you had your, basically your melee in a large elevator that's going up. And at the end of, so you get through that, and then at the end is a really cool and impressive part of the game where you have to fight the Shredder. But instead, Alright, let's see if I explain this. So instead, Shredder is actually on the foreground of the screen. And what you have to do in this fight is, foot soldiers come out, and one of the new mechanics that they added for the sequel to the arcade game was you can throw enemies towards the screen, and in and for the most part, doing that does nothing except just looking really really cool, which is fine. But for the home release, it was actually used as a mechanic, as a specific mechanic for this fight, where you had to throw the enemies towards the screen, and it would hit Shredder and whatever little robot he was in. And once you dealt enough damage, then Shredder comes out and hurls you back in time through the big screen or whatever that's in the Technodrome. So that made a whole lot more sense to do all that than what ended up happening in the arcade. I don't know if maybe this was what they were going with for the for the arcade game when it was originally in development.